I'm a breacher. So what that means is I'm trained to surgically breach, whether it's explosives, ballistic breaching, mechanical breaching, or manual breaching, getting into things, right? I've always engaged the enemy at close proximity. That was my job, to go out and find, fix, fight, and finish the enemy, whether it was with weapon systems, explosives, mortars. I was pretty good with mortars too. I had a conversation one time with Chris Kyle, the American sniper, and he killed like 150 something people with a sniper rifle. Man, that's pretty good body count, man, for a guy with a gun, you know? And I said, but you know what? I said, I probably killed more people than you did with a mortar, you know? You were doing onesies and twosies, man. I was doing groupsies with a freaking, you know? And cause I had to run a mortar system, man. Every 4:30 in the morning in Afghanistan, man, the Taliban on their way to prayer, they're like, hey, let's go drop some freaking mortars on these guys, right? And they'd launch the mortars and they'd come in, you know, and get me out of bed at 4:30 in the morning. I got to run out the mortar pit, you know, spin up my guys. We're always out there already ready to go anyways. And we'd return fire, you know, set up 120s and 80s. And start lobbing back, you know, and it became like almost every 2 to 3 days, you know, we did that on a regular basis. I probably did that for about 18 months, just that part alone. Yeah, you know, so I'm a kind of a weapons of mass destruction guy, you know. Shooting people's okay, but, you know, like watch them splatter all over the place is like a different thing, you know.
Yeah, you had said earlier, you mentioned something about being...
I'm joking, by the way, all right?
I was going to let it go for you. But you mentioned something about being a bomb maker, I think, or teaching bomb making classes?
No, okay. I got a background in explosives. I've been working with explosives for probably close to 40 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah, you know, I'm a breacher. So what that means is I'm trained to surgically breach, whether it's explosives, ballistic breaching, mechanical breaching, or manual breaching, getting into things, right? So surgical. I know how to use explosives in a surgical, and I also know how to use bulk explosives, you know, to just do mass destruction if necessary. But so I'm trained in that. I've got a lot of experience working with explosives. Even to this day, my business in Bali, I run a security company. And particularly explosive detector dogs is what I train and deploy.
Whoa.
For like all the Marriott hotels and local venues and things like that.
Wait, you're training dogs?
Yeah. So my company, my security company, we are a canine company. So we train dogs for narcotics, explosives, patrol attack. And that's what we do in Bali.
Wow.
So actually my wife runs that company now, kind of handed it off to her. But I have a background in that. And so, you know, I understand how explosives work. I understand the detection piece of it. I know how to use it surgically. I know how to use it to get into things, get out of things. So yeah, I've got quite a background in that.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, so that's more than I realized. And how long have you been training the dogs in Indonesia?
We almost the entire time. I'd say 6 years, 6.5 years.
Now, what goes into that? You know, because we take it for granted. We see all these dogs that are like so goddamn smart. They come to whatever the war zone is, whatever the horrible situation is. They either find people or they find where the bombs are. They find where the drugs are. They can hunt people down. Like, what? How do you even? What's the first thing about even training that into a dog? Is there only specific breeds you're even going to look at in the first place, and then what's the process?
Yeah. So. It's not always breed specific, but some dogs are better than others, some breeds. But what we really look for is we look for dogs with what's called high prey drive, right? In other words, a hunting drive, the desire to chase things like a ball, birds, animals, whatever. And a dog that's got some athletic prowess because, you know, like when I came through the airport through Atlanta today, they had a couple of short-haired German pointers that they were using as what we call vapor dogs. Basically, they were, as passengers were lining up to go through immigration, they had, you know, a row of 3 or 4. They would walk down this channelized hallway, and then the dog walked across the hall and back behind them. Then they sent 4 more back and forth. So the dog was scenting the air, because if you have any odor on you, like explosives, the dog will pick it up in the air and then he'll dial in like a heat-seeking missile on the guy that actually has explosives. So that's called vapor trailing. We do some of that, But really what we focus on is searching vehicles for like car bombs and packages, backpacks, stuff like that. We have them set the thing down. Dog walks up. The dog indicates. Usually he'll sit down if there's something in it. But it's a process. It takes about 3 months of training.
Mike, that's it?
Yeah, to get the dog, if he's good, right? If he's got the drive for it. And if he's got a high drive, like a Malinois. I love Malinois because they have very high drive. But they're also, they call them alligators for a reason. They can be a little snippy too. You got to be careful because they're very high defense and high fight drive. So, like, I got a couple dogs that if you even look at me wrong, they'll bite you. I mean, they're very defensive, and they're not fighting out of fear. They're just bold dogs. That's why the police and the military like them so much, But there's limitations when you're working around hotels because you got people walking in and out. You don't really want a dog around people like that. It might bite them. Those are issues, right? So you gotta know what you're looking for, know what you're doing. But here's the thing about canines. All the governments have spent billions and billions and billions of dollars trying to develop machines that were as good as a canine when it comes to olfaction, right? Detect explosives. Nothing has beat a dog yet. Why? Well, first of all, everybody thinks dogs smell like, for example, C4. If you ever smell C4, it smells like marzipan.
I haven't.
Yeah, but it smells like marzipan. What do you mean you haven't? What's all that stuff? No. What's all that stuff in the room? Okay, it's a joke. It's a joke out there. Okay, don't raid. No
I'm gonna
raid,
get
please.
swatted in like 10 minutes. We got one.
No, but it smells like marzipan in my mind. It's got a very distinguished smell to it, right? And so you smell it, and you think, if the dog smells that smell, then anytime he smells it, he'll hit on it. Actually, what the dog is smelling is the broadband frequency. Everything has energy. Everything has frequency. Everything, right? So one explosive will have one broadband frequency. Another explosive will have a little bit of a different frequency. It's a signature. And what happens is the dog sees the world through his nose as we see it through our eyes, right? Because if you think about color, right? Every color has a frequency. Every shade, every hue has its own frequency, right? We see that with our eyes. Our eyes are photoreceptors. They're antennas. They're picking up all the colors. And if you think about how many colors we're picking up at a time, right? And we're processing that, okay, through the visual cortex, man, our brains are like, a quantum computer like 1,000 times, man. It's doing a lot of information. The dog actually does more through his nose. He sees the world through his nose because he picks up frequency. You can take a dog that's blind and he'll still find his way around. Right? It's like, how does he do that? Because he's using his nose. Now, he doesn't see the world necessarily like we see it, but he can sense the energy as he's moving. And for example, there's been several stories in the years where people have taken their family pet, they've traveled across the country, somewhere along the way, they lost the dog. 3 months later, they're back at home and the dog shows up. It's like, how did he find his way back home, right? And so the reason he found his way back home was, imagine you're driving down the road and you see landmarks, street signs, you know exactly where you are, and if you did break down, you knew the way to walk back. But the dog is laying in the back seat, sleeping half the time, or just laying down with his head down. He's not looking out the window. Well, how does he know his way? What's happening is you're traveling, he's picking up all the frequency of the odors along the way, right? And he's remembering all that. Just like we're remembering it with our eyesight, street signs, he remembers where he's at. Okay, so he gets lost. All he does is backtrack because his memory, he remembers all the odors and frequencies. I mean, the brain, it's amazing, right? How the brains work, even the animal's brains, and that's how he finds his way back. Otherwise, for example, let's take, birds that migrate south during, the winter. How the hell do they find their way from Canada to Florida every year, same track? Or even the new birds, first time out, flying, and he's finding his way because he's picking up energy, the Earth's frequency, magnetic fields, right? And he's got sensor systems. We have it in our blood. We are designed to pick up frequency, and that's what the bird is doing. So he's navigating off of frequency, okay? And that's how he's flying. It's not because he's actually got a map and a compass and a GPS going, yeah, we're
right.
He's just flying.
That's how people, like even human beings, that's how those who like live off the land in some of these third world countries, they have this stuff because that's what they trained their whole life. But we, getting to grow up in the opulence of having a roof over our head and things like that, we lose some of that.
Yeah, and that's how animals work. Canines particularly, because and most animals, they use their noses. Pigs, there's a lot of things, right? They rely on their noses more than their eyes. And so, like I said, it takes about 3 months, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little bit more, depends on the canine. But it's a very specialized skill if you know what you're doing. It's pretty impressive what the dogs are able to do. And here's the thing about a canine. If you pick up an odor with a machine, it can only process one odor at a time. Whereas a canine can pick up 3, 4 different explosives all at one time. He can walk right down the line and identify all 4. He doesn't have to reset him and give him a new swab, clean out his nose and do it again. It's like it's one time. And also the dog has, in time, has the ability to make android types of decisions, right? He can start to figure things out, processing in his mind. My dogs know that, you know what? I smell something, but I'm not sure it's right here, but I smell it's around here. So I'll circle around on this side and maybe go back around this side until I find it, right? So they know they start working, they start developing a little bit of effective intelligence. But before COVID, I had 45 canines in Bali. I had 65 canine handlers running 24-hour ops, 365. And street value of my dogs were probably close to really about $850 to $1 million for 45 canines. Yeah, when they're trained properly, they're very expensive.
Now, do you have clients that you're constantly training dogs for and sending them back to?
No, I don't do that. I just all the dogs I have, I train for our own business.
Oh, just for you guys?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Just for us. Yeah.
Now, how many? Well, I don't even know if you want to say this, but like, how many guys do you have working for you?
I had 65 at one point. I had to let them go after COVID. Unfortunately, COVID, again, don't get me started.
COVID was bad for war?
No, this is Bali, Indonesia, security.
I know.
Yeah.
But like you guys are being sent to war zones and shit sometimes. Like that didn't stop because of COVID, no?
Right, exactly right. But the whole world shut down because of COVID, and all the properties that had our canines were like, hey, we got to shut down, so you take your dogs off the property. And then now I can't pay my handlers, right? It's like,
I understand.
And I got to let them go.
I understand now.
And then the canines, I actually think some of my canines.
I was misappropriating something else you said.
Yeah, I think some of my canines actually died from COVID. They had some really weird symptoms. And by the way, COVID's been around for at least 20,000 years.